The Milwaukee Bucks have started their season 1-4, losing a game to both the Brooklyn Nets and the Chicago Bulls, and in their only win, only narrowly beating the Philadelphia 76ers, despite the fact that Joel Embiid and Paul George were not playing. They are playing the Cleveland Cavaliers a couple hours after this video goes up, and given that Cleveland has yet to lose a game, I can't imagine that Milwaukee has much chance of winning that one, and that means they're going to be starting this season 1-5. Maybe it does not go that way, but one way or the other, there is a lot of reason to panic with the Milwaukee Bucks, so I want to talk about them. Hello everybody, welcome to Also Rusty Buckets. Subscribe and like the video, and if you want to enjoy this as audio-only experience, go check us out over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Also go check out the new main channel video called The Wilt Paradox: When Numbers Lie. It is about usage rate, scoring volume, and how it affects winning and losing in the NBA historically, as well as it gives a career retrospective for Wilt Chamberlain that's a little bit more in-depth than the usual coverage you see around the guy. Go check out that video, top link in the description and pinned comment. I would really appreciate it because we put a lot of effort into it and I really enjoyed the final product, more so than a lot of the more recent main channel videos. With that said, let's talk about the Milwaukee Bucks. So the first thing I want to talk about is the offensive end of the floor, because obviously defense is a huge concern here, given that defense has been Milwaukee's identity throughout the past couple of years, as they have persistently been contenders, and for them when they won their championship in 2021. Now, actually, in 2021, they did manage to have the 6th best offensive rating in the NBA during the regular season, but if you look in the postseason, they were actually the 11th best offensive rating while having the number 1 best defensive rating for any team in the postseason that year. So defense was their calling card. It was what won them their championship in 2021, and that is a missing factor here. However, that was to an extent to be expected when they made this Damian Lillard-Drew Holiday swap. Milwaukee knew when they were making that trade that they were going to be a worse defense. That's just how it works. If you're going to make that kind of swap, the hopeful exchange there was you are going to get a better offense because of Damian Lillard, and a lot of that was predicated specifically on the notion that they would play off of each other essentially flawlessly. You have Giannis, who is this paint and interior presence primarily, someone who's trying to get to the basket a lot, someone who is going to do a large majority of their work inside the three-point line. Meanwhile, Damian Lillard is a three-point god. It is the thing that he is better at than anything else, and something that he does at a higher volume more than just about anybody else except for Stephen Curry. So on that front, it only makes sense. Oh, you have this guy who is a master inside the arc and a guy who is a master outside the arc. That should fit really well. However, you also want them to have interactive plays and it not just be like, all right, I am the arbiter of the three-point line, you are the arbiter of the paint, this is what we're doing. No, you want to generate open threes for Dame off of Giannis action. You want to generate open dunks and layups for Giannis off of Damian Lillard action. But instead of that, it seems that these guys, whether it's a matter of the coaching scheme, whether it's a matter of the teammates around them, or just their own simple ways that they like to approach the game, one way or the other, these guys are not playing off of each other almost at all. I watched before this game, that Bulls game and the Brooklyn Nets game. I counted total screen actions with Giannis as the screener and Dame as the ball handler. There were in total 7, with really only 5 of them being legit. There were 2 instances where Giannis was going to set a screen but didn't actually set it, and you could define it as a ghost screen, but sometimes it's just more like a shitty screen than like an intentionally ghost screen type of thing. Like in these particular instances, it didn't generate any kind of opening. He didn't slip to the basket like his defender was anticipating stepping up. Like it didn't generate any offense at all. So I don't really even count that. But on the 5 instances across 2 games, there were 3 in the Bulls game and 2 in the Nets game where Giannis sets a screen for Damian Lillard. First play, Dame, open floater, so open it's a practice shot. Next play, Giannis gets Dame's defender on him, and Dame is driving inside. Giannis's defender is dropping, trying to cover Giannis on the roll, so he can't step up to defend Dame, and then Dame does a sidestep mid-range shot that was, again, wide fucking open. Next play, open dunk, easy dunk for Giannis off of a pocket pass from Dame. The following play, the last one, this one was against the Nets, It did not result in a made shot, but it did result in a good shot. Giannis and Dame pick and roll on the right wing. Dame throws the ball to Giannis on the roll. He drives inside. Brook Lopez's defender helps over, so he kicks it to Brook Lopez in the corner. Then Gary Trent Jr.'s defender helps off of him. Brook swings it to Gary Trent, and Gary got a wide open three-pointer, and that did not go in, which has been a big issue for Milwaukee, but we'll talk about that more in a second. Right now, what is of most concern to me is the Giannis and Damian Lillard chemistry. Now, I do think a lot of people have simply chalked it up to this being their only issue offensively, but it's definitely one of the larger ones, if not the largest one, because you want your two best players to be able to play off of each other. You still want them to get their own offense in their own way on their own at times, especially given the fact that you're trying to stagger these guys' minutes so that one of them is on the floor at all times. You know, you can't expect every single play to be a Kobe to Shaq lob type of situation. That's just not logistically going to happen. Both of these guys are dudes who like to isolate a little bit, and that's okay. It's something that they can sprinkle in there, but the fact that it's as rare as it is, but also as rare as it is while also simultaneously Damian Lillard is still getting a bunch of screens from Brook Lopez, a ton, and a little bit from Bobby Portis, well, at that point, it's like, why isn't Giannis just setting that screen then? So part of it is Giannis doesn't really seem like he's that much of a screener type. Like, he's even said before that screening is not something that has ever been a huge staple of his game, though he is a big man, and the big man element of his game is a very large staple of it, more so than the more perimeter-oriented aspects of his game. He still is mostly a ball handler at the end of the day. He is still mostly attacking out of the post, not setting up screen action for his teammates. Chris Middleton who was the majority, perimeter scorer for the title run. Well, he was mostly doing like mid-range face-up type shit, or like a lot of isolation, and a lot of the perimeter creation ultimately did not end up involving Giannis in the action all too much. And that is something that I think was lost on a lot of people, including myself, when this trade went down, because I think screening is something that we don't, especially as NBA fans, don't pay a shitload of attention to in terms of how good players are at that individually, until it's either a dramatically good level of screening where it's like, wow, unavoidably we have to talk about like how good of a screener Steven Adams is, for example. But a big man type player, a power forward or a center, is not inherently going to be some very prolific screener, and Giannis absolutely is not. As a result, doesn't really do it that much. That said, he does it well when he does do it, so maybe get the fuck over it and start doing it. I don't know, that's just one man's opinion, but it's also got to be somewhat systemic here, because Brook Lopez is setting screens for Dame all the time. Now, Dame's issue here, where I think this comes from, and the reason he seems more comfortable with Brook Lopez as the screener, is not only does he serve as this like giant wall for him to dribble around to create space from three, and he is a better screener than Giannis, but it's also that Brook isn't really looking for the ball to the extent that Giannis is. When Dame is coming off of a screen, he's looking for his shot before he's looking for anybody else's. But there's almost this degree of hesitance with him when he's playing with Giannis, where he doesn't know if he should look for his own shot or he should pass it up. He doesn't know. It's like he hasn't really ran screen action where the screener was intended as anything other than a means to an end for getting him open. And when it's pick and roll where the roll man is a large majority of the target there, it's a different context. And he's not used to that context and still has yet to get used to that context with Giannis. And I think largely it's just because they're not fucking doing it. Giannis can only get so good at screens if he's only doing them very occasionally. And Dame can only get so used to operating as a playmaker out of the pick and roll more so than a shooter if he's not getting that many actions where he isn't just getting a screen from Brook Lopez instead, where he is just being encouraged to be the shooter instead. Simply, they just need to run this action more. But also, I do worry a little bit that maybe these guys were just less compatible than we actually originally thought they were. We just went, okay, ball handling guard who likes to shoot a lot off of screens, plus super freak athlete who's a freight train going to the basket and is nearly 7 feet tall, that equals unstoppable pick and roll. And as I previously mentioned, when they have ran it, 3 out of 5 times it resulted in a made shot, and 4 out of 5 times it resulted in a good shot. So that's fucking dominant. That is excellent NBA offense. Run that more. That is great. But also, even when they aren't running that, the offense doesn't work in other ways either, in ways that it used to before. Because the Bucks have never been like this horrible of a three-point shooting team. That's something that I want to highlight for you right now, because they are currently shooting 30% from 3, which is 28, the 3rd worst in the entire NBA. The only teams worse at shooting them right now is the Philadelphia 76ers and the Utah Jazz. And mind you, the Sixers are without their 2 best players, which not necessarily because one of those players is the best three-point shooter, though that is the case. It's also a matter of those star players are not generating open looks to the degree that they should be. But neither are Dame and Giannis. And if you look at three-point percentages, DeLon Wright shooting 50%, but that's on 1 attempt per game. Honestly, I think he should be playing more because of the defensive issues. We'll get to that in a second. Taurean Prince is at 47%, which is great because he is playing a lot. AJ Green, 45% on 2.2 attempts per game. He is coming in and playing some spot minutes as a three-point shooter. He hit 2 in a row against the Chicago Bulls. But after that, in terms of guys who are actually taking threes, Brook Lopez is at 30% on 5 attempts per game. Bobby Portis is at 28% on 2.5 attempts. 27% on 5.8 attempts for Gary Trent. That is awful. He's supposed to be a three-point shooter. That is first and foremost what he is supposed to be bringing to the table, and yet he absolutely is not doing that. Damian Lillard, 27% on 9 attempts per game. Pat Connaughton, 26%. What sucks with the Dame thing, he started off pretty good. I don't know if it's the last 2 games. I know he was just dreadful against Milwaukee. He went 1 for 12 and 0 for 6 from 3. Before that, his season stats were 28 points per game, 6 assists, 47% from the field, still 31% from 3. So there is that. He's only actually had 1 game where he shot well from 3, which was the first one against Philadelphia. But offense has been working for him, except for in that last game individually. And I mean, Giannis is averaging 30, so they're getting their own offense, but it's not getting offense in a way that results in the team as a whole generating good offense. It's instead Dame and Giannis are getting their own points, but there isn't a scheme being done here. Currently, they are towards the bottom of the league in assists, which is not ideal. They have a very, very stagnant offense. They are currently 27th in assists. Meanwhile, they are 17th in turnovers. So they're not passing the ball well, but they are getting turnovers when they do decide to pass the ball. So many possessions where they're just watching either Dame or Giannis create, or worse yet, watching Bobby Portis create. If I'm going to call out any individual player that's not Dame or Giannis here, it has to be Bobby Portis, because Bobby Portis has been an increasingly frustrating player to me for Milwaukee, because he has a lot of offensive capabilities that are really nice. And when he's having a good game and he's not making too many mistakes, he can look like an awesome role player, like 6th man of the year candidate tier. But I strongly believe that he is not the type of player that this team needs. He is a ball stopper. He makes poor decisions with the ball with regularity. There were 3 different times across these 2 games where he took a post fadeaway with either Giannis or Damian Lillard on the floor, and they just like sat there and watched him do it. And it's like, that is just simply not doing enough to use your offensive talent to the best of their capability. Watching a Bobby Portis post fadeaway, of which he went 1 for 3, by the way, even if that shot goes in, I don't consider that a good offensive possession. It's okay for Bobby Portis to take a post fade here or there. I'm not saying it's against the rules, but if Giannis and Dame are not initiating your action in some capacity and instead they're just watching that happen, then that is a failed possession. They don't have to be the one who shoots the ball, but they should have something to do with how they get the shot that they get. And regularly I saw possessions where that just was not the case. And Dame and Giannis not having plays where they're interacting with each other in some capacity makes it easier for the defense to load up on them individually. If Giannis is on the other end of the court and Dame is isolating on like the left wing, well, the defenders on Dame have no incentive to commit to anything except for him, because you're not really worried about Giannis on the opposite end of the court. So their offense is just very much settling for mediocre looks. They're not hitting the threes they're getting. A big part of the reason they're not hitting their threes is they're not consistently generating very good ones. A lot of off of the dribble threes from Damian Lillard that are just like really deep and like, dude, you shot 34% from three last year. I know this is who you are. I know this is your reputation, but maybe dial back the 35 footers a little bit until you start to shoot at least above 30% from three. That would be nice. Brook Lopez, dude, again with the deep three-pointers, I don't know why he thinks he's this good. He has not been a very strong three-point shooter for a while. In fact, his entire tenure in Milwaukee, like, to me, Brook Lopez is one of the most overrated shooters in the history of basketball, because people act like he's like Dirk from outside sometimes. No, 35% from 3 on 5 attempts per game, that's fine. And especially for a center, it's cool. This year, he's at 30%. Last year, he was at 36. Year before, 37. So those are nice. But before that, 30, 35, 34, 31, 36. Like, it's fine. But he takes threes often. Like, he is like a goated level shooter. And it actually baffles me almost every time he does it. DeLon Wright, I think he needs to play a bit more because he's been good on offense and he's a good defender. Pat Connaughton, not shooting the ball well. Just, it happens. I get that. But honestly, they feel pretty thin, because if I'm looking at this lineup, obviously no Chris Middleton because he's not been playing yet. So that would help them get like to a realistically decent 9-man rotation. But like DeLon Wright and Pat Connaughton are cool. Gary Trent Jr. is cool. Taurean Prince is cool. But none of these are guys that you're super excited to be in your rotation. So you have Brook Lopez as this 3-and-D center who regularly can't shoot his threes. Bobby Portis, who is this offensive like 5 who does not pass the ball well, regularly takes shots that he has no business taking, and doesn't contribute a ton to the defensive end of the floor. And then Giannis and Damian Lillard both getting their own offense individually, but never complementing each other and never actually leading to a good team offense. So on that end, huge disaster. I think it helps a lot if you get Dame and Giannis involved in every action, and specifically involved together in the same action as much as possible. A lot of this also, of course, comes down to coaching, and Doc Rivers is one of the worst coaches in the NBA, and I can't believe he has a fucking job. Honestly, the last couple of years, I've been nice to Doc Rivers just because I've been like, look, the guy does have a history of being a decent coach, but I'm fucking over it, okay? He has not been an actually positive coach in terms of like making them notably better. Maybe ever. You could just argue 2008 was just because they were super stacked, and if anything, them not making it again, not winning it again. Obviously, part of that is the Kevin Garnett injury, but then Rajon Rondo got better to kind of supplement that a little bit, and you were still very talented and still had yet to have to deal with the big 3 Heat, but no, that didn't happen. So he's just been coasting off of this title that he got 16 years ago in an NBA that was entirely different. Like, how many players who are in the NBA in 2008 are even still in the NBA now? I think Chris Paul, LeBron, Durant, Al Horford, I want to say. But it's a short list. It's a very short list, I'll tell you that much. So yeah, his coaching being dog shit is obviously a huge negative. There's a lot of talk about Darvin Ham being on the bench. People are calling them dumb and dumber. I don't know that Darvin Ham is actually that big of a negative influence, because while he was not a good head coach for the LA Lakers, doesn't necessarily mean he can't be a pretty decent assistant coach. So I'm not actually buying into that too much. I think a lot of people speak a little bit too confidently about the inner workings of like an assistant coach as though they actually really know the details of that. They fucking don't. Doc Rivers should be fired. All right. I hate that I'm saying this 5 games into the year. I don't really think this is how it should work typically, but I don't think he should have had the job to begin with. Not saying sticking with Adrian Griffin was necessarily the move, but maybe giving him a little bit more of a chance to regain the locker room, and rather than just determining that it's over with. They also shouldn't have fired Mike Budenholzer to begin with, and right now he's probably, at least for me, my front runner for Coach of the Year for how much he has transformed the Phoenix Suns. I suggested that they just simply bring him back after they fired Adrian Griffin, but instead they wanted to go with the king of blowing 3-1 leads. On the defensive end of the floor, this is simpler. They have no perimeter defense other than the 14 minutes a game that DeLon Wright is playing. Gary Trent Jr., they signed, expecting him to be a point of attack defender, like a strong one for some reason, which I really didn't get. Now, when he first actually came into like the NBA zeitgeist, the NBA world, players that are regularly in discussion, not a scrub on the bench. This was in Portland during the bubble, and he had a lot of moments as a strong defender, and I feel like those moments kind of gave the idea that he has that capability within him, when really he didn't keep that up when he became a regular rotation player with Portland to a super strong degree, and he especially didn't keep it up after he went to Toronto and ended up being a very highly valued offensive option for them because they really didn't have any other options. And we like to think like, oh, well, he's been a good defender before, so he can just step right into that defense and be, the same guy that it looked like he could be. That has not held up thus far. I have seen him get burned time and time again. Couple of different instances where he left like Zach LaVine wide open on a backdoor cut, for example. I think Ayo Dosunmu got him on a backdoor cut with a Vooch pass from the top of the key as well. Just not very aware, and his one-on-one defense is fine, but the amount of times where I saw him lost with his off-ball defense, annoying, just bad defense. Taurean Prince is a fine defender. Damian Lillard's a bad defender. Multiple possessions where he got killed, especially by Dennis Schroeder in that Brooklyn Nets game. It's been said already, the amount of guards who are just cooking the Bucks every time, because Cam Thomas was great against Milwaukee. Dennis Schroeder was great against Milwaukee. Kobe White and Zach LaVine were great against Milwaukee. They're getting dicked down by guards, and it's because they have no perimeter defense. And against the Chicago Bulls, specifically, Nikola Vucevic was hitting every goddamn three that he took, so Brook Lopez ended up having to stay out of the paint a lot, and then it just became that much more obvious how much there is just no resistance on the perimeter. Because oftentimes, like, if the rim protector comes over, it'll make it seem like it's not as bad because someone prevented a shot, but when it's just like layup line after layup line, it becomes very, very clear how bad the perimeter defense is on this team. And you can blame some shit here on Brook Lopez, I guess, but honestly, I don't blame him for not cleaning up every single mess that his teammates make on every possession. Let's talk about Giannis defensively. I'll be honest, dude, I feel like he's fallen off on that end a little bit. And maybe this is just these games were bad, or he's starting off slow on this end of the floor defensively, but I felt less impressed by his defense last year than I have historically. And just like this idea of like the free safety roamer weak side shot blocker thing, I don't really feel like he does that often, and he doesn't do it super effectively or in some devastating way in any capacity. It's just he's still a good defender, don't get me wrong, but transformative defender, defensive player of the year level, as he won it in 2020, I'm pretty sure is the year that happened. I would say, honestly, no. I don't think he's been all defense level. The defense has been dog shit, and it starts on the perimeter, but Giannis's inability to, like, really bother people as a help defender only makes that issue worse than it already was. The Bucks are 24th in offense and defense. Dame and Giannis look like they have no chemistry at all. It kind of looks like they don't even like playing with each other. All of their shooters are missing their shots. None of their perimeter defenders can play defense worth shit. Bobby Portis is a good player, but does not really fit this team all too well. However, he has a very specific play style, so I don't know how easily you could just flip him for like a 3-and-D player. So across the board, there are a litany of issues from just a roster construction standpoint, from a player tendency standpoint, and then you add on to it that this team is coached by Doc Rivers. I don't really know that there's much you can do to recover. I would fire Doc Rivers. I think anybody else could do a better job at this point. So on that front, that's negative. That's something you can do to help things. Force Giannis and Dame to run more pick and roll because it does have good results. And then hopefully, whether it's trading Bobby or some other move, you're able to add better shooting to this team. I will say, like, some of these guys are going to improve substantially. I don't expect Gary Trent to shoot 27% or Dame for like the entire year. That's going to help. Their opponent three-point percentage was also pretty high because they've not done a great job defending the perimeter, as I previously mentioned. So they have lost the three-point battle pretty much every game. I'm just looking at their basketball reference page right now, and it also says that they're ranked 30th in attendance. So there's just nothing but depression going on in Milwaukee, man. I can't believe this went as poorly as it has. I'm not saying it's over, but it's really starting to feel like the writing is on the wall, and there's a bunch of rumors about Giannis potentially being on the move. It's brutal, man. I feel sorry for you if you're a Bucks fan. Then again, you won a championship a couple of years ago, so maybe don't complain too much. But I don't know. Life sucks. That's the note for the end of the video. Life sucks. Go watch my video. Shout out to Nick for watching. Shout out to Nick for making this video, editing this video. God, this is a disaster. Goodbye. Horrible outro, but I'm not. Fuck it.